Hey everybody, welcome back to my coverage of the PogChamps 3 tournament. Today we're going to be looking at the Myth versus Sardoche match. Myth, the Fortnite streamer, and Sardoche, the French variety streamer. So this was in Group A. This is actually also the first round 2 match, so this is the second time that both of these players are playing. And so, yeah, that's what's up. Sardoche is actually one of the favorites to win the entire tournament. He has one of the highest ratings. He's been studying a lot, and so he's definitely one of the favorites to win this match and also win the entire tournament. Just a little fun information. Before the match, Myth was playing Valorant, and he jokingly said, can I just forfeit the 2 games? And contrarily, Sardoche, he was practicing some rapid chess in the chess.com rapid pool before the game. So maybe that will be foreshadowing, or maybe that will be some nice irony for this match. We'll just have to see. Sardoche is the favorite, and without further ado, let's just get into the chess. Myth was white the first game. He started with e4. We have c5, a Sicilian defense, knight f3, d6, and Myth decides to go for an open Sicilian with d4. We have c cross d4, knight cross d4, knight f6, and this is all very standard stuff. This position has occurred hundreds of thousands of times at all levels of chess. And here comes the first inaccuracy of the game, which is bishop to d3. This move isn't really the best. Knight c3 is much better. The reason is because you can never really advance this pawn to e5 safely in a lot of lines, and so your bishop is just going to be stuck behind this pawn in a lot of lines. So bishop d3 is considered not as good as knight c3, but it's a very, very minor positional inaccuracy. So let's see if it affects Myth, or let's just see what happens. So Sardoche plays a6, which if Myth had played knight c3 on the previous move, we would be going into a Najdorf. So this is like almost a Najdorf. It's not technically the Najdorf since we don't have knight c3, but maybe we'll get a Najdorf type pawn structure. We have castles from Myth and e6, so getting that Najdorf-like pawn structure from Sardoche. We have c4, so Myth is setting up a Maroczy bind pawn structure, just grabbing a lot of control over this d5 square. Whether he's doing this intentionally or simply by accident, who knows, but other than this bishop d3 small inaccuracy from Myth, we have very, very good chess from both players so far, and I am definitely impressed so far. We have bishop e7 from Sardoche and bishop g5, castles, and queen a4. And this is kind of a mistake. The queen's not going to really do anything on a4, and it can simply be kicked away with the move bishop d7, which Sardoche plays. We have queen back to c2, so the queen is better placed on c2, but now you've allowed Sardoche to develop his bishop with tempo here. So the game continues h6. We have bishop back to e3, not trading this bishop for this knight for no reason, which is good by Myth, so good job to him. We have knight c6, Sardoche develops his last piece, and here Myth should really just develop his last knight to c3, or even to d2 is fine as well. But instead we have queen b3, moving the queen for a third time and along the same diagonal even. So kind of these meaningless queen moves are wasting a bit of time. Let's see if Sardoche can punish Myth for it. We have queen c7, so Sardoche now just developing his queen, and knight c3, Myth develops his last minor piece. And here Sardoche makes a positional mistake himself. He plays e5, which this e6 pawn was controlling these light squares very well. So when you push it to e5, you're giving up these light squares. This d pawn is going to be backwards for the rest of the game, so it's just not very positionally accurate to give up these squares like this. It would have been much better simply to keep applying pressure to the center with a move like rook fe8, or even a move like rook to c8, getting this rook on the half-open c-file. You could maybe pressure the c-file. So either of those moves would have been better than e5, but we have e5. Myth plays knight f5, the best move, and Sardoche takes this knight, bishop takes f5, because that knight was going to be annoying. You can't really get rid of this knight by g6 because the h pawn is too weak, and this knight is going to be pressuring this backwards pawn. So this is definitely a worthwhile trade for Sardoche. We have e takes f5 and bishop back to d8. So Sardoche is looking to reroute his bishop. I'm not actually sure what he's planning to do here, but maybe a better plan would have been to bring this rook to e8 and bring this bishop back to f8 just to get it out of the way for now. You do have these pawns on dark squares, so who knows. We have f4 from Myth, and this is yet another positional mistake. Just because first of all, it's undefending this bishop. There might be some knight g4 ideas later on. And also it's making this g1 to a7 diagonal very weak. The queen can come to this diagonal. The bishop might come to this diagonal later. And your king is on this diagonal. So it's just not a very good move. Even though it strikes in the center, the positional weaknesses that it creates are not worth it. We have rook e8 from Sardoche. And here, Sardoche wants to play knight g4 instead of rook e8. He wants to play knight g4, but there is this really annoying knight d5 move, which gains a tempo on the queen, and this is a very nice outpost. And so Sardoche would probably have to, move the knight back to get rid of this knight. So it's just not something he can do right now, even though it is an idea. Maybe he can play it later. But anyway, we have rook e8, f takes e5, and rook takes e5. Knight takes e5 would have been a little bit stronger, just gaining a tempo on this bishop, also setting up some discoveries on this e3 bishop from the rook. But we have rook takes e5 instead, which directly attacks the e3 bishop, which is okay too. Rook fe1, defending the bishop, and we have knight g4. So now Sardoche is allowing this knight to come to d5. Which Myth does. He plays knight d5, and here Sardoche plays queen a5, which hangs this b7 pawn. So queen a5 was a mistake, though this position is very sharp. We've got a pinned bishop. We've got, this knight is pressured. It's very sharp. Both players can go wrong very quickly here. But Myth needs to find the right move, which is queen takes b7. He actually saw this move, but he did not play it. Instead, he went for knight b6, but this is a losing move. Black has a lot of winning moves here. The best move for Black is rook takes e3, and now if White recaptures this rook, then Black simply has bishop takes b6, and now this rook is pinned. There's really no good move that White has here, so White could try h3, then simply bishop takes e3 check, king h1, and after queen e5, this is actually going to be checkmate very soon. So this is just one way Black could have won very quickly after this knight b6 blunder. However, Sardoche plays knight takes e3 instead, which is still winning. It's just not as winning as rook takes e3. We have knight takes a8, and now Sardoche needs to find this queen c5 move, lining up the queen on the same diagonal as the king. And the attack here is just going to be very strong. So Sardoche needs to find this move. Does he find it? No. Instead, he plays knight d4. And after queen c3, White is back in the game. But here, Myth actually decides to take this b7 pawn. So he should have taken it earlier. Now it's actually a mistake because of this queen d2. It's a fork on the rook and the bishop, and it's just not this position is not good at all for White. There's mate threats, so the queen needs to stay connected to this g pawn. There's ideas of d5 interfering with this queen. So if you try to save your bishop, for example, with bishop e4, we have bishop h4 from Black, and now the position is just falling apart. There's not going to be a lot you can do here. Even if you go for this, queen c8 check, simply king h7, and now you need to come back, defend your bishop, queen b7 check, and you're simply going to lose this rook on e1. So the position just falls apart for Black. So Sardoche did have this queen d2 move he could have played, but he missed it. He played knight dc2 instead, going for this fork on the two rooks. So he figures, even if White captures my knight, I can get the fork again. However, this doesn't actually work. Here, Myth needed to play bishop takes c2. After knight takes c2, Myth can trade this rook. And after queen takes e5 and rook f1, White is back in the game. So he traded the rook and escaped the fork like that. That's what Myth needed to play, but instead, we have this... instead, Myth played queen d7, which simply hangs a rook. So maybe Myth was feeling some time pressure. He was getting a little low on time here. I think Myth's idea here was he was going after this bishop, but he forgot that the queen defended the bishop from behind. So queen d7, sort of a really meaningless move. You needed to definitely take this knight here. So Sardoche definitely takes advantage of this. He is definitely taking one of those rooks, but will he take the right rook? Because one of the rooks is much better than the other rook, and that is the e1 rook, because you're just going to win this rook completely for free because you've got two guys on it, the queen and the knight. So after knight c7, sort of kind of another aimless move by Myth. This actually just hangs another knight. After bishop takes c7, it's really looking like a lost position for Myth right now. The commentators here were mentioning how Myth does have this one swindle left with queen c8 check, and after king h7, Myth can play f6 check, and if Sardoche doesn't notice that he can take this bishop and plays g6, then Myth will have queen f8, and it's going to be a checkmate soon. So White will be totally winning in this position. That was a swindle that Myth could have done. After bishop takes c7, though, Myth did not go for queen c8 check. Instead, he went for b4, another meaningless, seemingly meaningless move. It gives up a pawn for no reason. Actually, sorry, it doesn't give up a pawn. Actually, Sardoche could go for this trade. Queen takes b4, and after queen takes c7, knight takes d3. So this could be a trade that Sardoche goes for. But the idea behind b4 is actually to kick the queen away from the defense of the bishop. So Sardoche, however, stays in contact with his bishop. He plays queen b6, and after rook takes e1, also this queen b6 move, not only does it stay in contact with the bishop, it lines up the queen on the same diagonal as the king, and now we have this discovered check, knight c2 check, which is going to pick up the rook. Here, Sardoche actually had a checkmate in 4 with knight takes c4, and the idea is if the king goes to h1, well, now we just take this rook and it's back rank checkmate. And if the king comes to f1, then simply immediately knight d2 is checkmate. The knight checks, the queen covers this diagonal, and the rook covers this file. So he did have that mate, but he missed it. But knight c2 check is still completely winning because it's a check and you're going to pick up this rook. So we have c5, trying to counter-attack this queen, but after rook takes e1 check, king f2, d takes c5, f6, so maybe black will somehow blunder back rank checkmate. It's unlikely, but it is possible. Unfortunately, we have simply c takes b4 check, and after queen d4, just giving up the queen for no reason, but white is already completely lost here. We have queen takes d4 check, and let's see how Sardoche finishes this off. It's unlikely there will be any stalemates since Sardoche has all of these extra pawns, but, you know, who knows? Anything could happen. We have king f3 and queen takes d3 check, king g4, and here on the previous move, actually, instead of queen takes d3 check, black had queen f4, and this would have been checkmate. But simply taking white's last piece is also fine. Queen takes d3 check. We have king g4, rook e3, king h4, queen e4 check, king h5, queen g6 check, king h4, rook e4 check, g4, and queen takes g4, and this is checkmate. And yeah, so first game goes to Sardoche. Myth was being a very good sport. He said good game even at the end, even though I don't think Sardoche could hear him. But there we go. I don't think I have anything else to say about this game, but Myth will need to win the next game in order to bring back the match, in order to tie the match, bring it to an Armageddon game. I don't know why I'm rambling, but I don't think I have anything else to say about this game. Thank you for watching. Check out my PogChamps 3 playlist. It's up there. And check out the next game of the match. It's going to be over there on that side. Thank you for watching. I love you all, and I'll see you in the next video.